There are children who never seem to need much. They didn't cry loudly or make scenes. They were the quiet ones, polite, understanding, strangely composed. Adults called them mature, as if that were a blessing. But maturity, when forced, is not a gift. It's a mask a child wears to survive in an unpredictable world. These children learned early that peace depended on them, that the tone of a household, the emotional weather of a parent, or the safety of a moment could shift suddenly. So they learned to read the air like a barometer. They noticed the tightening of voices, the sighs behind closed doors, the fragile cracks in a parent's smile. They learned when to speak and when silence was safer. While other children were learning games, they were learning balance, emotional equilibrium, the art of keeping things from breaking. They became the comforters, the mediators, the ones who understood. In truth, they were not understanding. They were adapting intuitively to the absence of protection. And yet, the world rewarded them. Teachers adored their composure. Parents boasted about their good manners. Relatives admired how mature they were. No one saw that their calmness came from compression, the silent swallowing of fear, anger, and the right to need. Inside, they felt out of sync. They laughed when others did, but their laughter often felt delayed, like an echo rather than a spark. They envied the loud, carefree ones who could afford to be clumsy, demanding, or foolish. They wanted to be small and safe, but life had already assigned them the role of the caretaker, the emotional adult in a child's body. And so they grew, but not upward, just inward, into thought, into vigilance, into a kind of invisible strength that looked like maturity but felt like exhaustion. In psychology, there's a word for what happens when a child learns to take care of others before they have been properly cared for. Parentification. It describes a quiet reversal of roles. When a child becomes emotionally, and sometimes even physically responsible for the well-being of their parents or environment, but not all parentification is visible. It doesn't always look like a child cooking dinner or paying bills. Sometimes it's emotional. The child who comforts a crying parent, absorbs the tension of arguments, senses what's unsaid, and molds themselves to fill the emotional gaps adults cannot manage. These are the children who grow up too fast. Their nervous systems adapt to constant unpredictability. Their empathy becomes a defense mechanism, a way to predict emotional danger before it strikes. Neuroscience calls this hypervigilance, a state in which the brain is always scanning for subtle threats. Over time, this constant alertness becomes so normal that peace feels unfamiliar, even unsafe. They learn to be emotionally self-sufficient, not because they were strong, but because they had no other option. The emotional labor of understanding others becomes their identity. They intuit feelings before words are spoken, anticipate moods before they're expressed, and suppress their own needs to maintain stability. Such children often receive praise for their emotional intelligence, but that intelligence is survival in disguise. Their compassion, their maturity, their calmness, all are products of necessity, not choice. They didn't grow into balance. They grew into vigilance. And when the environment finally quiets down, when there's no longer chaos to manage, their body doesn't know how to rest. The nervous system, conditioned to tension, mistakes calm for emptiness. Stillness feels like something's missing. They look for someone to care for, because care has become their way of existing. This early emotional acceleration shapes not only their personality, but their entire internal rhythm. It distorts their relationship with time. As children, they were old. As adults, they remain cautious, perpetually on the edge of caretaking, always preparing for a storm that may never come. Here lies the paradox. The same maturity that earned them admiration also became their cage. They were praised for being calm when they were really suppressing. They were told they were strong when they were, in truth, just enduring. Their composure became their invisibility cloak, one that hid both their brilliance and their pain. When a child learns that love is given to the one who doesn't cause trouble, they begin to equate worth with self-erasure. They learn to be good at not needing, good at smiling through confusion, good at saying it's fine, even when it's not. This is how the old soul is born, a child who speaks like an adult, but feels perpetually unseen. The price of being the mature one is loneliness. They grow up surrounded by people yet untouched in their depth. Others confide in them, lean on them, but rarely look back to ask, "And you?" Because the mature child does not appear to need care. They speak the language of strength too fluently. They internalize the rule that vulnerability is dangerous, that to ask for help is to risk rejection or chaos. So even when love is available, they cannot receive it fully. They stand at the doorway of care, but never step inside. Their body resists, tense, polite, self-contained. They long to be held, yet feel ashamed of wanting it. And because they are competent, the world keeps giving them more to carry. The more responsible they appear, the less others notice the quiet exhaustion beneath their competence. It becomes a cycle. The more they manage, the less they are allowed to collapse. Even joy becomes difficult. Pleasure feels indulgent. Relaxation triggers guilt. They have been conditioned to associate peace with danger, to believe that rest means something bad is about to happen. So they keep doing, fixing, holding, unable to stop, afraid that if they do, everything will fall apart. They have mastered survival, but not safety. They have learned to contain emotions, but not to express them. Their strength, admired by everyone, is the very reason no one thinks to ask if they are tired. And so, they continue. The responsible ones, the composed ones, the invisible heroes of unstable homes. They have outgrown their childhood, but their inner world still whispers the same plea. Can I rest now? Over time, the role of the responsible one becomes more than just behavior. It becomes identity. What began as survival transforms into personality, into the illusion that this is simply who they are. They become the friend everyone trusts, the colleague who always delivers, the partner who keeps things steady. To let go of control feels like betrayal to their very sense of self. But beneath that composure is a constant hum of tension, because when you've built your worth around reliability, any sign of weakness feels like collapse. Even in moments of love, they cannot relax. Their heart listens for shifts, reading between the lines of tone and silence, scanning for disappointment before it arrives. They are not paranoid, only experienced. They have learned that safety is fragile, that peace often precedes the storm. This creates a strange emotional dissonance. As adults, they appear grounded, yet internally they live in two timelines, one that feels ancient and one that never began. They carry the weight of premature adulthood alongside a quiet grief for the childhood that never unfolded. They are old in wisdom, but young in trust, worldly in observation, but innocent in need. Relationships become a mirror to this split. They are drawn to people who need them. The broken, the lost, the unpredictable. Because those roles feel familiar. Caring gives them purpose. It feels like home, even when it hurts. But when someone offers them genuine, steady love, they hesitate. They mistrust it. The very thing they have always longed for feels foreign. In intimacy, they may find themselves stuck between control and yearning. They crave closeness, yet fear dependence. They want to be held, yet feel unworthy of it. Love, for them, is often laced with guilt, as if receiving it means taking too much space. They can articulate emotions with astonishing clarity, but the body lags behind, unable to feel what the mind already understands, and so they live in contradiction, needing rescue but refusing to be saved, wanting to belong yet fearing to be seen. Their maturity becomes both shield and shackle. To remain strong feels safe, but to remain strong also means remaining alone. They are haunted not by what happened to them, but by what never had the chance to happen. The laughter, the mistakes, the innocence that was replaced by awareness too soon. They outgrew their own age, but never truly arrived in adulthood. They hover between eras of the self, belonging nowhere fully. What does it really mean to grow up too fast? Is it wisdom, or is it weariness? Is it a kind of grace, or simply an early apprenticeship in pain? When we say someone matured early, what we often mean is that they were forced to face truths before their heart was ready to bear them. The child who comforted others learned empathy, not as a virtue, but as armor. They developed insight at the cost of innocence. And though the world applauded them for it, somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of them still wonders if awareness arrived too soon, if it was a theft disguised as growth. To grow up too fast is to witness the hidden architecture of adulthood before you have the tools to understand it. You learn that love can coexist with chaos, that people who mean well can still wound you, that silence is sometimes safer than honesty. You start to see the cracks in everything, and once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. And yet, that very awareness gives birth to a kind of depth. Children who grew up too fast often develop an extraordinary sensitivity to existence. They feel the nuances of emotion, the fragility of others, the unspoken in every room. They become artists, thinkers, quiet philosophers, people who can hold complexity without turning away. But here lies the existential tension. How do you reconcile the gift of consciousness with the wound that created it? They are grateful for their depth, yet grieve the cost of it. They know how to soothe pain, but rarely know how to be at ease. They understand people deeply, but struggle to understand themselves outside of their usefulness. The tragedy is not that they became wise, it is that they had to. They entered awareness before wonder had a chance to take root. Their life became about comprehension instead of discovery. And as adults, they often feel both enlightened and empty, filled with understanding, but starved for simplicity. To grow up too fast is to become fluent in the language of sorrow, while others are still learning joy. It is to carry the world too early, and to never quite put it down again. As the years pass, the child who grew up too fast begins to look back and realize how time has folded in strange, uneven ways. There are moments in their memory that feel ancient, like they belong to someone twice their age, and others that feel suspended, unfinished, as though their heart is still waiting for permission to be small again. They often dream of returning, not to a place, but to a state of being. The innocence of not knowing, the safety of being held without having to earn it. But time only moves in one direction, and so their longing becomes existential. A quiet yearning for what can never be relived, only reclaimed internally. To grow up too fast is, in truth, to have experienced the human condition prematurely, to have known impermanence before wonder, responsibility before freedom, awareness before rest. They saw how fragile people are before they ever got to believe in their invincibility. Their heart opened to the truth of suffering while their hands were still too small to hold it. And yet, this is what consciousness always does. It breaks the illusion of safety in order to reveal the depth of being. These children simply met that truth earlier than most. Their grief is not just personal, it's philosophical. It's the grief of awareness itself. The moment the soul realizes that life is both beautiful and unbearable, and that to love anything deeply is to live with its impermanence. In this way, they embody a kind of spiritual paradox. They are both old and unborn, old because they have seen too much, unborn because they have not yet been allowed to live freely. The child who grew up too fast carries within them a timeless ache, the longing to be both wise and innocent, to see the world clearly without losing the capacity to marvel at it. If life is a dialogue between knowing and wonder, then their task is not to unknow, but to rediscover wonder through knowing, to find innocence after experience, not before it. For true maturity is not the loss of childhood, but the reconciliation with it. Healing for the child who grew up too fast does not mean undoing the past or returning to innocence. It means creating safety within awareness. It is learning that they no longer need to earn calm, prove strength, or anticipate danger before it arrives. The storms they once prepared for have already passed. Now, the work is to convince the body of that truth. Reparenting begins quietly. It's in the moments they let themselves be unproductive without guilt. In the sighs they finally allow to leave their chest. In the first time they say, "I don't want to be strong right now," and mean it without shame. These are not regressions, they are homecomings. The adult self must become what the child self never had. A presence that stays, listens, and doesn't demand performance. To speak kindly to oneself, to rest without justification, to play without purpose. These are sacred acts of rebellion against a past that required constant composure. Slowly, they begin to distinguish between responsibility and love. They realize that caring for others does not require abandoning oneself. That empathy can flow outward without draining inward emptiness. They learn that being needed is not the same as being loved, and that to be loved, one must first be seen. The journey of healing is circular. Not a return to childhood, but a reunion with the parts of the self that never got to grow safely. It's understanding that the same sensitivity that once protected them can now connect them. Not a burden anymore, but a bridge. They learn to rest without fear, to receive without apology, to feel joy without scanning the horizon for loss. They begin to trust that safety can exist without vigilance, that stillness can be peace and not a prelude to chaos. And perhaps, one quiet day, they find themselves laughing. Not the polite laughter of composure, but the unrestrained kind that shakes the whole body. In that moment, the child inside finally exhales, no longer burdened by the need to understand everything, finally allowed to simply be. That is the gentle miracle of healing, not becoming who they were before, but finally becoming who they were always meant to be.